going on, everyone? I hope you're having a good day. Welcome back to another episode of Buzz Beat, Charlotte Hornets podcast. This is Brian Geisinger. Today, I will be joined by my co-host Darian. Richie Randall is producing on the ones and twos, having a sick game here, but we appreciate the hustle. Nonetheless, it's been a few weeks since we last talked to you guys. I think dating back to the Grant Williams emergency injury podcast, which emergency felt about right at the time, and since then it has it's really has just sort of like intensified the Hornets season. I don't know, not quite going fully off the rails here, but just it's been a little wobbly the last few weeks. The Hornets find themselves now at 17 and 19 on the season. The Hornets currently 26 in offense, 22nd in defensive rating, and 26 in net rating, according to Cleaning the Glass, at minus 6.8 points per 100 possessions. As far as the Eastern Conference standings, they're tied in the wins column with Toronto. And only Washington has fewer wins at 3-21. Again, the Hornets at 7-19. Before we get into that, wanted to wish Darian, you and your family, an early happy holidays here, and just how are you doing here?
Happy holidays to you and yours as well. And I'm doing pretty good. I mean, one of these days we would have a Charlotte Hornets game to look forward to on Christmas. Maybe one of these days we'll have a Charlotte Hornets game to look forward to at all. But
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. Looking forward to the holiday. Um, Hopefully, maybe we can get a win somewhere between now and then.
Yeah, we shall see. Obviously, sort of like the biggest news of the day. Again, it really has not been a banner week for the Charlotte Hornets, who are making headlines in more ways than one. Just amazing when you do the Google search Hornets fan PS5 and the type of headlines that pop up. NBA team apologizes after pretending to give kid PS5, then taking it away. Charlotte Hornets is from NBC News. Charlotte Hornets apologized after taking back PlayStation 5 gifted to teen fan during game. Yes, I don't know what's on your Christmas list for this year, Darian, but PS5s apparently they're going fast in the Charlotte community here. So be mindful of that. But yeah, the Miller injury. Worth discussing, because this one was a bit of a bummer. LaMelo Ball misses 7 games, so he's out while Mark Williams returns, and so you're getting to see some of the minutes with Mark playing with Brandon, and that's certainly like an intriguing setup. It's 2/3 of this look that we've been basically since the 2023 draft we've been looking forward to. The Hornets, for that loss to Philadelphia, they even get to the starting lineup that I think a lot of people had them projected for ahead of the season too, right? You see LaMelo Ball, Josh Green, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, Mark Williams. LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams play a total of 10 minutes together in that game before Miller injures his left ankle for a second time during the game and doesn't return. Darian, just sort of like your initial reactions to the injury to Miller, and sort of like some of the disappointment that comes along with it, especially as it coincides with the return of LaMelo, and then Mark really only a handful of games back after missing 11 months of action too.
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't have any words for it, to be completely honest. I mean, this same thing I think happened last year when Lamelo got hurt in his last game he actually played. Was that his last game when he got hurt against the Orlando Magic? It was once again. This is what we've been waiting for. Our preferred lineup. We finally got it. Lasted 2.5 quarters. Same exact thing happened here. Um, Same injury. I mean, to the ankle. I don't even know if it's the same ankle, but to the ankle, and it's hard. It's just really difficult when you think about the last 3 years of being, rooting for this franchise, hoping that we can just see what everybody looks like together because uh, there's a lot of stakes, future stakes at that, with this particular lineup, and you just want to see what it just looks like, even for a little bit. And in the last 3 years, we've gotten 6 quarters, so I mean, it's definitely not. I mean, it's definitely not the players' fault by any way, shape, or form, but it is just frustrating that time after time, we were, there's a new injury to talk about. Luckily, it seems like it's questionable, but uh, and I think we all know here, like this team, they're not trying to win. This is their
Mhm.
way of. I mean, some people didn't like it when I was saying tanking, which I said this about a month ago. So we'll just say let the cards fall where they may. That's what I've been kind of saying to get away from the tanking word. But that to me, that's what they're doing. So a questionable injury, he could come back because I think that there is some value where if he's healthy, he needs to play. It doesn't have to be the whole season. It doesn't have to be, you can figure that out later. But we have to see something this year because I think I could speak for a lot of fans that next year it's almost playoff or bust. Like the East has to be incredibly strong to accept another lost season. And I would accept that if they were to be close and just not make it or just be outclassed and fine. But we can't have this again going into next year. So you have to see something this year, especially considering Grant Williams has missed time. We're just now getting Mark Williams back, who I've said before is almost still a rookie, still hasn't played 82 games. There's just a lot. And I hate to put so much stakes into a team that has knew everything, but you're starting to pay people now, and I don't think we can allow it to just be like, oh, well, we're still rebuilding. It's like, no, you've already paid Miles, already paid LaMelo. The media every day is talking. Every time LaMelo scores over 20 points, the media is saying he needs to leave. Now, if he scores under 20, he's the worst player ever. He can't win, yada yada. But if he scores over 20, he's the best thing ever. We're holding him back.
Mhm.
So it's just it. I hate to really make it seem like it's urgent, but it's urgent that we just see what these guys look like on the court. That's
Yeah,
kind of just where I'm at with it.
yeah, it's a bummer because obviously Brandon was having a really strong season. Not
Mm-hmm.
perfect, but a strong season. 21 and a half points per game, taking 11 threes per game. It's crazy. 35% on those threes, 90% from the line. 3.5 assists. Still not really getting to the rim much. And that's again continues to sort of like be an area of concern with him, but having a really nice season. I thought he had played pretty well in absence of LaMelo. In the 7 games that LaMelo missed, Brandon Miller, 36 and a half minutes per game, over 26 minutes per game, 3 assists, 4.5 free throw attempts per game. I think that's a notable number. So as an indicator that Brandon, obviously the usage going up, but also him, being aggressive on the drives. One of the games during that stretch, I think it was the second to last game, is the win in Indiana against the Pacers. That was the game that I sort of circled. Hornets had lost a lot in a row. I can't remember how many games they lost in a row coming into that game. It was several. Um, Brandon's, as they're having to sort of like toggle the lineups around, Brandon's even having to play some four, during some of these games. Um, but that game was big for me because I know the Pacers aren't a good defensive team. I know Tyrese Halliburton is a very poor defender. But down the stretch, with how the Hornets were able to use Miller in pick and roll,
Mm-hmm.
as a ball handler or as a screener to get to go after Tyrese Halliburton, that was, again, you want to stop short of like sort of like apex creator stuff, but like because I'm not sure that's ever in the cards for Brandon, though I think very highly of him as like a wing scorer and a guy who has some like creation to his game. But him down the stretch, 2 buckets, in the final 2 minutes, including I think, or 2.5 minutes, including the one dunk he had where he split the hedge and got downhill, and then another time he scores against Halliburton on the switch. That to me was intriguing and sort of like jumped off the screen a little bit in terms of like Miller not just playing off the catch, Miller being, in attack mode and helping close out a good team on the road. Flawed team certainly in the Pacers, but So to see him then get hurt a couple days later, it's tough. I mean, I think you and I have been on the same page the whole season, even before the season. Like this for me was never the year for the Hornets to really like, go all in. I thought they were going to get to a point where they were going to sort of like lower the ceiling of the roster, whether that was through ultimately, the roster not being all that talented. I didn't think it was going to be that hard to do it, but it was either going to be injuries were going to happen, or they were going to find ways to sit guys, or there'd be a trade or two on the margins. And then that was going to be the sort of thing that like got them enough where they were safely in the lottery. Maybe not top 4 like odds or whatever. It's pretty hard. That can be a pretty hard thing to crack into, although they're sort of like knocking on the door there, which is a little crazy. But just like a number that I want to pull up is the number 163. That is the total but combined minutes, including last season and this season, that LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Mark Williams have played together. These are the 3 most important guys in the franchise, I think, by significant portions. Miller and Mark are still on their rookie contracts. LaMelo in year 1 of his, max rookie extension. But these are the guys. This is who they're building the boat up for right now. And for 153 minutes, and because all of those guys have missed time. I mean, Miller's been the most steady for sure, but he missed time at the start of this year. I know Mark was out then, and now he goes down again too. And it just stinks. Like it just all we want to do is watch these guys play together. It's like I'm
asking for much.
I think if you cover the Hornets, like you get into the process over the results, right? Because like that's what you're having. The team is not good enough to constantly be thinking about wins and losses in a vacuum. You have to sort of be thinking about things in a larger, more macro sense. But like on a night-to-night basis, like you want to hear Eric Collins and Del Curry having a good time, and you want to see the young guys play together, And so it stinks for Brandon. I wish him a speedy recovery, but certainly one that you want him to take his time on too. And unfortunately, if he's out for a period of time, the product will obviously suffer. He's not someone they have that can be replaced. You know what I mean? Certainly. And obviously so much creation is already on LaMelo's plate. So yeah, that's a tough one. And again, we'll see how much time Brandon misses. Maybe I've missed something. I know Charles Lee spoke about it briefly after the game against Philadelphia, but I don't think they put out sort of like a timeline yet on his return. So I was just hopeful for a full recovery, and the faster the better. Any other thoughts on Brandon Miller, Darian, before we flip to the next topic here?
It's just unfortunate. I mean, like you said, I think he was having a real good bounce back stretch because at the beginning of the season he did not play well. So I think that, which I value players, especially Brandon Miller is only in his 2nd year. I value players that can have a rough outing. Brandon Miller had a rough maybe 15 games, and I think he bounced back with authority at that, like times 2. So I really appreciated that from him. So it just sucks that he is injured. And I do want to say that, like me and you both, we're not saying that we know for a fact Brandon's out for an extended period of time.
Right,
It's just more so the amount, like every time we get close, an injury happens. And then particularly with Brandon Miller, even going back to last year, his injuries are a little more like day to day. Like he'll have a couple of games and he'll get hurt. He'll have a couple of games and he'll get hurt. And that can be worrisome as well. It's not like, okay, we're just going to set him out for 2 weeks and then, he'll be back. Like kind of like what they're doing with Trey Mann. Brandon Miller's a little more consistent, obviously negatively, but it's just something to monitor. And this could all be a part of their plan. But as a fan, that obviously we don't know what the inner workings of the team are, it's hard to see how they're going to know what to do next if they can't see everybody on the court. We've played they look good in practice game when we had Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, all those. And I'm not necessarily talking about those guys, but that era, they look good in practice. And then we get to the season and the Mitch Kupchak is at the end he waits all 82 games to be like, we just weren't good enough. It's like so. It's like okay, so that's just kind of where the frustration I think comes from. Is just the fact that we need to see on because there's just no way they can make any type of observations without seeing the guys on the court. It's just impossible. And then like Grant Williams, who we've talked about, especially during that podcast, how important he is to the team, regardless of stats. Trey Mann, how valuable he's become just being the sixth man and being able to create offense. Just not having those guys, I just don't see how you can make a decision on let's surround LaMelo with talent when you don't know what the talent is. And then, like I said, we're starting to pay people. If Trey Mann's going to come back, he's going to get paid. Grant Williams is already being paid. Josh Green is already being paid. And while they're, good contracts to a certain extent, it's still hard to be like, okay, now we know we can make the playoffs with this team. You don't know at all. And so that's the worrisome part.
Yeah, the man contracts that's going to be something to think about, chew on during the season. And certainly like as this team heads into restricted free agency with Trey, and that's something we should talk about probably more as the season progresses. Like I want to see this guy back in Charlotte. I think that's
for sure.
That's important. And, but yeah, it's hard to sort of like gauge where the market's going to be for him at this juncture. And certainly the Hornets would have, a big advantage in terms of restricted free agency as well. They have the hammer there because they can match any offer, but I'd be curious to see if Charlotte tries to just sign him up or if they say, Trey, test the market and we'll let's see what you get and then come back and then, maybe we'll match or something like that. But those conversations are for a later date and time. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the return of Mark Williams. During the last episode, we talked a lot about what became, no surprise, the season-ending injury to Grant Williams, and why that was such a bummer, why it was a crucial blow to the rotation for Charles Lee, everything the Hornets are trying to do on both sides of the court. And at the time, the front court depth of the Hornets was like really limited. I mean, we were considering like what levers can Charlotte pull to even just like paper over some minutes here as they were going to get ready to go to battle with, Taj Gibson and Moussa Diabate basically as their two centers and a limited rotation in the four spot too. But around that same time or just before the injury to Grant, you had the news that Mark Williams and Nick Richards had just returned to, I guess, like contact sort of like action with the Swarm. So one of the things we said at the end of that episode was, it felt really tenuous at that moment. But if Nick and Mark, like if those guys come back, it's gonna change at least it'll be easier for the team to put together like a credible front court in 48 minutes of like legitimate NBA level center play on a nightly basis. And yeah, man, it's been awesome to see Mark Williams back. Like, I don't want to diminish that at all. And obviously, like, he's been resting certain games, not playing him in back-to-backs. It's probably been helpful that the Hornets have also had like a period of the schedule where they just really haven't had that many games, in part because of the, the NBA Cup and just some other scheduling quirks, I guess. But he's played 5 games now, 2 starts, almost 13 minutes a game, about 64 minutes total. In those 13 minutes per game, averaging 8.8 points, 5 rebounds, 1.6 assists, which is interesting, a block, shooting just under 67% from the field. The advanced numbers in a very limited sample are pretty good too. 8% block rate, 18% offensive rebound rate, 25% defensive rebound rate, 24% assist rate. The Hornets have been outscored by 49 points in those 64 minutes with Williams on the floor. The offense has not been great, scoring only 96 points per 100 possessions in those minutes. Again, small sample. Mark Williams is a valuable offensive player, and I think he's done some good things thus far on the offensive side of the court. 15 of 17 shooting in the restricted area for him. I mean, no surprise. The bulk of his shots are going to come down there. And, hooked up with LaMelo a few times the other game, which was good. 10 dunks already on the season. So, the majority of his field goals made have been dunks this year. But just in this limited minutes, well, first off, Darian, what were your thoughts? How did you feel about the return of Mark Williams, and how would you evaluate his performance since he actually got back into the rotation for the Hornets here?
I mean, that first game, I was like, he did not look good, but that's kind of what I expected. But what I didn't expect is I think he's been getting a lot better every single game. And as you mentioned, there's been restrictions on his minutes. He's missing back to backs, and so it seems like he's getting in the groove pretty quickly. I mean, obviously, there's some things he still needs to work on, and it's just going to take time. And that was kind of my biggest thing coming into the season when there were fans talking about possibly making the playoffs. I was saying that like it's going to take time for Mark to get acclimated and then get ready to win. Like that's just a whole nother thing. So that's why I didn't expect anything. But I mean, he's getting better every game, which that's what I like to see. I'm glad that we're having some paint protection. Because before it was just Nick Richards, and then if you look after that, it was nobody. So it's good to get that. I think he had 3 blocks last game. He looks a little nimble, which is I think that's good as well for a 7-footer with a back and foot injury. I think that I'm liking what I see physically, and that's really just the first probably 20 or so games is what I'm going to be looking at from him. Is just how does he look on the court. I'm not really worried about what points he puts up. I'm not really worried about his stats at all. I just want to make sure that he looks healthy, and for the most part, I mean he's looking like he's getting his legs underneath him, every single game. And that's really all I can ask for at this point. It's not like we're playing for anything. So the biggest thing I just want to see is just him being comfortable on the floor. And I think that, you know, we should use Diabate a little more. You do have 2 centers coming back from injury. I know Nick Richards probably wasn't as severe as Mark, of course, but uh, I think that would help a lot. Is using Diabate, because I think that what's happening so far is that particularly Mark, maybe not Nick, but particularly Mark, he's getting some minutes against aggressive centers, and I don't think that's kind of what I want to do. So that's why I think Diabate should be getting some of these minutes. Luckily, when we played the 76ers, Joel Embiid wasn't playing. I mean, not lucky for him, but lucky for us, because I did not want to see Mark in that situation. I almost would have preferred them to not play him at all. So that's just one thing I would want to watch, is that they pay attention to how these other teams are going against play, who's the opposing center, and kind of put Mark in a position to be, I say successful, but my plan of success for him, once again, is just for him to be healthy. So I think that's something they should use Diabate for, because I do not like Diabate has just basically gone non-existent, which it doesn't make any sense.
He was
Considering
playing.
we do
He was
have
playing so well early on
right. It just
in the
doesn't make
season
any sense.
too, and I think he still. I was checking these numbers either earlier today or yesterday. He still is like one of the best. I mean, I know like on-off numbers can be like a little noisy, but I still think he was sort of like the best in terms of like on-off difference, or at least the Hornets sort of had the best. He had the sort of like the best individual, net rating on the floor this season. You don't want to put too much weight into that, but again, I think he was just like impacting winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And was doing a lot of good stuff on the glass and defensively. But I get it. Like the priority is to play. Mark's here. You've got Richards back. Like I understand the hierarchy and stuff like that, but Musa does look like a find, and that's something I want to like keep that thought alive here. As far as like the usage for Williams has gone, you've seen him in the dunker spot a fair amount. I think he's been very active going for offensive rebound putbacks, which is big, and that's something with a guy like Mark, you're expecting a fair amount of his offense to come out of like broken plays and stuff like that. Like it's either pick and roll kind of stuff and him pulling in the defense on the roll, and then the Hornets playing off of that, or occasionally him getting a feed, a lob. He's looked, I think, pretty good finishing lobs so far. I think Micic hooked up with him in transition during the Cleveland game for a nice above the rim finish. There were 2 plays of his that I thought really sort of like jumped out a little bit to me that I liked. There was one in the New York game where someone for the Hornets drove baseline on the right side of the floor. Mark was spaced out to like the left wing, like Charlotte's doing with their centers a lot this season. And as the drive happened, he cut down the middle of the lane, snagged a pass, and then hit a hook shot over the top of Towns, like kind of like pretty fluidly on the move. We don't think of Mark as like a hub, post guy really like that. But I've always, even going back to his time at Duke, it's the sort of like quick post up moves like that, with the little flashes of touch, are nice as sort of like a counter if a defense is able to sort of like is trying to ignore him, or is not like is in rotation, and what he can do in those sort of like spaces. That's interesting to me. Him being active in that like 5 slot or slot 5 role, whatever you want to call it, is interesting. And then I really liked, they had a play in the Cleveland game. I mean, they were getting destroyed already, but they had a play in the Cleveland game where it was a horn set. Mark started at the right elbow, and Brandon Miller started in the left corner. And they ran some action to get Miller coming out of the corner. So he curled off of a down screen, and then he cut through the lane, and then Micic looped back up off of a down screen and into a dribble handoff with Mark Williams. And then that led to another lob finish, actually. And I think Mark actually got fouled on the lob, caught it, like with Jared Allen, like I guess kind of in the vicinity, if memory serves me correctly. So and then after he got knocked down, he bounced up off of it. So I thought Williams is done. There's been some flashes that I've really enjoyed so far, and it's great to see him back out on the court. And looking forward to. I mean, now my focus shifts. Like when I put the Hornets on, I'm going to be looking for LaMelo, Mark Williams pick and roll. LaMelo, Mark Williams 2-man game. LaMelo, when he's able to break a defense down and get into the paint, is Mark Williams in the dunker spot, or is he on the wing? Where's he cutting from? Can LaMelo find him? Like, that's going to be where my eyes are going to be drawn to. So before we move on here, Darian, what will you be sort of like paying attention to mostly with Mark Williams over the next, couple of games here, a few weeks?
I'm really just going to be looking at his defense, because that's, to me, what we truly need the most. We really need that. It's not as though our perimeter defense has gotten much better. So we're still allowing a lot of drives to the rim. So hopefully, Mark is seen as somewhat of a defensive anchor for this team. And that's kind of what we've been asking for the last 3 years from him, is that, when Mark does get to his peak, I guess we could say, that he is the anchor for our defense, and that we should be able to funnel, attacks at the rim. But I don't know. I don't know how that's going to look. He is coming off an injury. I'm not expecting him to be at that defensive anchor spot yet. I am expecting, just like I said, gradual improvement is all I'm looking for. But I do need to see flashes, because, like I said, we need it. there's nowhere else it's going to come from. It has to come from him. And then, like I said, it's not like our perimeter has gotten better to where some of the laxes are allowed for Mark. It's no, we still need you to be that serious anchor. That's really I just need flashes.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm worried it's going to be so tough to evaluate the defense in the context of this current roster, but that it's still going to be, it's going to be something to keep an eye on, obviously, and study pretty heavily. But man, the context is like not, it's not great. Deontay White in the comments has a good shout out too, saying he's going to be looking at the discipline from LaMelo. And that's a good point. This is, as the season feels like a little wobbly, and we'll see sort of like what happens, what the diagnosis is for Miller. This is an interesting moment for LaMelo for sure, in terms of like what his play looks like, what his leadership looks like. And because the team's not going to win a lot of games, but just like, are they competitive? Are they a professional NBA offense? And fair or not, an outsized chunk of that is gonna fall on LaMelo to not just like be explosive and game breaking and all that kind of stuff, but also to like get them organized, keep them focused on that side of the court. So certainly something team wide really to keep keep a lookout for. Okay, all right. Enough of the Hornets in terms of injuries and lineup rotations, that kind of stuff. We'll get to. I guess we'll try to end the podcast on a happier note here. But with the holidays coming up, Christmas right around the corner. I think I'm done with my shopping. Pretty sure. I think I am. So I'm feeling pretty good about that, which is good. But I'm not the biggest Christmas movie guy. I don't know about you, Darian. There's some that I like, but it's not like my like preferred like holiday genre movie, I guess is what I would say. But Richie, Ever the producer, he hit us with this a few days ago, which was he asked us to choose a character from a holiday movie whose qualities best resemble that of a current Charlotte Hornet. So, Darian, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you here. Do you have a movie, a character, and who is that Charlotte Hornet that it makes you think of?
We're gonna go with some animation here, and I'm gonna go with Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. Everybody knows who Rudolph is,
Yep.
and who I compare him to is Lamelo, because that is the star. that is the person you look at, and I feel as though that is how Charles Lee coaches this team. That's how Jeff Peterson, I think, runs this team. Is Lamelo? You're the guy, and we are going to fail or succeed based on you. And that's kind of how Santa looked at Rudolph was. Look, Rudolph, you're going to lead Dasher and Prancer, and you're going to lead all them, but we can only make it if you do your job. And that's just what it feels like with LaMelo. Now, I will say, I will prefer Rudolph's ensemble to ours, but they at least had his back.
Dasher was a good slasher. There's like no doubt. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
So it felt as though they had his back a little more, but yeah, that's just what I'm going to go with. LaMelo, obviously, we talk about it. He's the star of this team. I know some people hate when he's criticized, but I personally just feel like the only reason he's criticized is because we know what he can do. We know how important he is to the organization. I think it gets taken out of context sometimes that people hate him or don't like him, or I don't know why that's the case, but it's only because if he wasn't good, we wouldn't talk about it. Because I see a lot of times people are like, why aren't you talking about Nick Smith Jr., even though I like Nick Smith Jr.? It's like, well, Nick Smith Jr. is not the guy I want leading.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason. So and I feel once again that's what was like with Rudolph. If they weren't able to deliver those presents with Rudolph, despite Rudolph leading the way, they would have been questioning Rudolph and why he couldn't do it. And that's what I feel like LaMelo's getting. We talked about it earlier. LaMelo scores 20. Charlotte is holding him back. He scores under 20. He's a losing player. No one should ever want him.
Yeah.
You live or die with it, and that's how Rudolph is treated.
No, that's a good one. Look, Rudolph, he had that dog in him. There's no doubt about that. He got it done that night. And yeah, you brought up NSJ, and like, look, we may need to have a Nick Smith conversation sometime soon here. We'll save that for maybe a 2025 pod. But man, that's a good one. The solid pull there, Darian. Mine won't be as good, but just this one's a little bit off the beaten path. I don't know. Have you seen the movie Die Hard before, by any chance?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a Christmas movie. So
exactly, and it is. There's a lot of ways I could take this, but I'm just giving Eric Collins the Argyle Award because, like, Argyle, like the source of comic relief, throughout the movie. He also helps save the day at the end with the limousine, and Eric Collins, he makes tuning into this team a lot of fun.
I think that's a good pool. I think
he's really like, Collins is like, he's a true professional, and he not only like makes you, it's obvious that he's having a good time at these games, and he and Dell have good chemistry and they work well together. But I think this is season 10 for Eric with the Hornets, and man, it's flown by. And he has continued to deliver a good product despite the team making the playoffs once in that stretch. So I just a salute to him. And Argyle, again, great character in that movie. is very funny, and also like helps Bruce Willis or John McClane save the day there at the end. So I'm gonna go with Argyle and Eric Collins. All right, last one here. You and I are gonna don Santa hats, and we're gonna give out a couple of gifts here. So this is the Santa Darian and the Santa Brian segments of the show. We're going to give out gifts to those on the team or people associated with the team that need something. We all need something at this time of the year. I need another cup of coffee, I feel. But so Darian, without further ado, what is your gift as Santa Darian to either someone on the Hornets or people around the Hornets?
My gift. There was actually a lot of gifts I wanted to give to players, but I feel like what's even more important than that, and I landed on patience for the fans because I don't know what's next. There has been lots of times I feel like this with OKC, you knew what was next. I felt as though you saw them enough to saw where you could see where they were going. And even if what they originally planned didn't work, they had and I shouldn't say they had because they still do. They have so many first round picks, they can pivot. So if Shea didn't end up being Shea, they could have pivot. If Chet didn't end up being Chet, they could have pivot. Here, I do not know what it's like. Now, granted, we're still they worked hard for the players they have on their team and the draft conversation that they have. So we're still in that early stage, and it does seem like we're trying to, for lack of a better word, bite that style. But I don't know what's next. So we're just going to need patience. We have talent on the team. So it's just a matter of just waiting to see what happens next. I know that, our new owners preach that, we want to make Charlotte a premier franchise. One, I'm pretty sure that they realize it's harder than what they anticipated. Two, it's just not, it's just simply just not easy. It's just not easy at all. So we're just going to need that patience. It's going to take time. Right now, I say that because unlike OKC, we don't have the abundance of first round picks. We do have 2 from Miami, which that one's looking pretty solid right now. And then the one from the Mavericks.
Mm-hmm.
But then also we just have a bunch of second rounders, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, we're just going to need the patience. We're still dealing with injuries, like you and I stated earlier. We've had our preferred at the time, our preferred starting 5 only for 6 quarters in the last 3 years. So it's just not. We're just gonna have to be patient. Right now in tanking mode, they're not gonna give up much, which understandably so. So we literally it's just going to be, just wait until the off season. That's really, if we just gotta hope we can make it to the off season with something, whether that's health, whether that's some flashes. But it's just gonna take patience. So that's what I'm giving, because I know we're tired of waiting, but that's what we're just gonna have to do with this moment.
That's a good one. Like, really, patience for everyone would be a good thing. Like, even in and around the Hornets, like, it's no fun. I know they're gonna be bad again this season. To me, I thought that was obvious in the off season. And it puts a lot of eggs in the basket for next season, but just they had to hang on to this lottery pick. They had to do it. There was just no way around it. All right, mine, I'll be quick here. I've got a few to give out. I'm going to give out knee braces to my man Taj Gibson, who started 8 games now for the Hornets this season. And I don't think Taj was anticipating starting 8 games this year. I know the knees have got to be bothered. It's getting cold outside now too.
If I was him, I would sue, because it's like, this is not what I signed up for.
I wanted one more paycheck and, there's some stays in some nice hotels and be a mentor. And all of a sudden I'm in here having to guard, all these amazing NBA players. I've got ankle braces for LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. I think those are easy. I've got whatever the best present under the tree is. We're giving that one to Cody Martin, by the way. I think he's the one Hornet to play in every game so far this season. Played in 26 games. and just played pretty well actually. Like Cody's a guy that I'd be curious to see if there was a little like trade buzz for him. I think we've sort of like considered that before. We think the sort of like lack of shooting probably makes it like a sort of like a non-starter. He feels like a guy you probably can't play beyond like the first round. So I'm just not sure a playoff team's really going to be super eager to give something up. But 33% from threes on almost 4 attempts per game. And it's probably not enough to really like swing it there, but like it's a little interesting. And I just think Cody's played pretty well. And after basically 2 lost seasons for him, it's been nice to sort of like see him back, and I think playing pretty well. And then lastly, like PlayStation 5s for all the Hornets fans out there. Just everyone gets a PS5. The kid who got screwed over the other night, he gets a second PS5. He can have one upstairs and one downstairs at his house. Everyone gets to play all the video games they want in 2025. That's what's coming out of the bag for me here. But Darian, any other last second thoughts on the Hornets before we wrap up and get out of here?
Yeah, I see this one comment that says I had different takes. I just want to say that what happens is sometimes I say trade, but I don't necessarily mean trade to get better. Sometimes I say trade to get worse. So I feel like those are things that we look forward to with the team in this situation. I don't think anyone is saying to make any moves. I don't think BG would say. I don't think anybody will say to make moves to get better. We need to get worse because there's no point of trying to make us better for this season. But yeah, overall, I think that it's going to be a rough season, unfortunately. That's just what it's come down to. But it's good to be in the holiday spirit. I will say, because it's a serious thing. Don't let this team bum you guys out.
Yeah, it's gonna be fine. It's fine.
It's gonna be fine. I mean, at the end of the day, it's basketball. But I get it. Like I do get it. Trust me, I get it. I want them to be good just as much as anybody else. But it's. I mean, it's just where we are with this franchise. A lot of stuff out of hand. Luckily, we get to watch LaMelo ball. I think he looks really good. He looks really healthy. I think that's huge. So, I mean, that we get to walk away with something this season.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we'll have plenty of time to talk about team building stuff in the draft. There's some interesting guys to dive in on. We'll see sort of like we're a ways off from all of that. So we've got time to get into it later on, especially as the calendar actually flips to 2025. But like I think look, if you follow the Hornets, like everyone I think knows this stuff already. It's like if you were living and dying with wins and losses, like we'd be having candlelit vigils for you. You know what I mean? Like it's you would have been long gone here. So it's like I would reiterate that. Like I think there's a chance if they can get healthy for this to be like not a winning basketball team necessarily, but like a good product and one that's like fun to watch. Like I think Charles Lee's done some good stuff this year. Trey Mann is incredibly entertaining. Brandon Miller is a stud. Mark Williams, very fun young defensive center and lob catcher, and obviously LaMelo, just like his skill level and talent is it feels limitless sometimes, and I think ultimately that's sort of like why the critiques of him run the full scope. But I think ultimately when people are like, if they are hard on him, it's because you have an idea of what this guy maybe could potentially be. So
there's a difference. You can tell by reading the tone, or if you're watching a podcast, like Chandler Parsons, like that's a guy I just truly don't think he likes LaMelo, and that's fine. You don't have to like him, but there's a difference.
Tune it out, man. I would just say get off. Like honestly, get off of to social media for a little bit. Like it's like I promise you. I've been trying to do that a lot, actually. I've been trying to do that more the last month or so, and with varying degrees of success. But it's been good for me. And just like anytime you start getting like upset about what a former player is saying about your favorite current player or whatever, like just remember it doesn't actually matter. They probably don't know what they're talking about. And like, you can just read a book or get on your PlayStation 5 or like watch a basketball game. You know what I mean? Like that stuff is
Watch other teams. Oh my, that's something that's
yeah,
been.
way more
I
fun,
will.
way more fun than getting upset. Like again, it's easy for me.
Yeah.
It's easy to say than like, again, I think we all fall into these traps at times, but
Mhm.
man, just don't, if you can, avoid that stuff because like it's pretty toxic. All right. Well, look, since we're wrapping up here, just wanted to say, for those who tuned in, whether it was live or listening on the podcast app or their podcast feeds the next day, we really appreciate that. We really appreciate you guys for sticking with us. It's been kind of a hectic last few months, but we're continuing to try to put out episodes as regularly as we can. This is a tough period because Richie is in a very limited capacity. Despite that, he's still the best basketball podcast producer in the world, and I'm like knee deep in college basketball and juggling that with a full-time job. So this is tough, but we're still putting it together. We're having a fun time talking about the Hornets, but just a lot of gratitude for the people that continue to rock with us. It really does mean a lot. And just to all of those people, happy holidays, safe travels, enjoy the time with your family, with your loved ones. And just know we'll be with you guys when the calendar flips to 2025 too. So Darian, thanks for coming on here with me. And really appreciate your time as well.